to my knowledgeable colleagues, analysts in the Secretariat, analysts in IHS, Platts Global, and so on, to come up with their conclusions. But be that as it may, we are facing what is likely to be a global game changer in terms of the energy transition, recovering from the pandemic, which had seen the energy markets, oil in particular, in an unprecedented disequilibrium in 2020, which necessitated our members in OPEC working with our friends and partners in the non-OPEC to take extraordinary measures, also unprecedented in 2020, in order to help us and the market navigate through this historic slump that we saw. We're glad that our efforts started yielding some fruits. We have seen in 2021 the world is back to growth again. We've seen a massive recovery in terms of GDP and demand growth for oil. Just coming from a session where I had even higher numbers than OPEC's number, we believe that the demand growth in 2021 was in the region of 5.7 million barrels a day, which was very, very impressive, coming from the historic lows of about 9.3 million demand slump the previous year. And going into 2022, we are still projecting a continued growth, a robust one, of about 4.2 million barrels a day. In the last session that I just attended, I even had higher numbers. But where are we today? We are facing, the world is facing a possible threat to supply from the Russian Federation, which is the second largest exporter of oil and liquids in this world, a partner in the declaration of cooperation that we entered into with the 10 non-OPEC countries in December of 2016. And the perception of consumers and the world, the market in particular, is that this threat, whether it materializes or not, is already reverberating through the markets. And we had seen such a surge in the market since the unfortunate events started unfolding themselves. But for us in OPEC, our focus remains the fundamental principle that bind us together, the principle of always striving to maintain stability in the global markets, and at the same time also to ensure that the security of supply is guaranteed. Our members continue to do their best under the circumstances. As you know very well, we are in the final stretch of returning about 5.8 million barrels a day to global markets as part of the 9.7 million barrels a day that we withdrew from the market in 2020 to mitigate against a total collapse that we were heading to. We took this conscious decision in July of 2021 to begin to bring back the final tranche of this 5.8 with monthly release of 400,000 barrels a day that would hopefully liquidate the entire 5.8 by September of this year. And we are continuing to faithfully implement this decision that we unanimously took. We have no control over current events as geopolitics have overtaken the market and is dictating the pace of the market. All we can do is to stay the course of our decisions, to faithfully implement them, and hoping that our leaders, our political leaders, will eventually overcome this historic challenge that is threatening not only the peace in Ukraine, but the global peace as a whole. As students of history, we know in previous times when diplomacy ran into obstacles and conflicts unleashed, we have to redouble our efforts, and we need to make sure that we are back on track and that diplomacy triumphs over conflict. At the end of the day, it's a humanitarian tragedy, not only for the people of Ukraine, but for all peoples of the world. What is happening there affects all of us. We are all humans. We are fathers, we are mothers, we have children, and therefore we are cautiously optimistic, reasonably confident that the intervention of leaders, political leaders, the powers of this world would eventually restore some measure of stability and peace to save human lives, which is the most precious resource that we have. I'm glad to be in your midst. We are learning, as I said, every hour. My colleagues keep updating me with developments around the world, but we have to remain focused. We have to remain calm. We cannot afford to lose our sense of balance, let alone give way to our emotions to overtake our rational thoughts and decisions. Just like we survived COVID, I am confident that we will overcome this global challenge. But both ourselves in OPEC and our partners are continuing to meet every month. We have been doing that now since beginning of 2021, just in anticipation of these type of unthinkable events or uncertainties. We decided consciously that we have no luxury of waiting to meet quarterly or half-yearly like we used to do. Now, our ministerial meetings, every month, we have to meet and review things. My colleagues in the Secretariat and the technical committees are working day in, day out to keep abreast with developments around the world, in the market, in touch with producing countries, with consuming countries, so that we'll be able to fulfill our mandate. We are determined to be part of the solution, and we have always been. Having survived these 7 cycles, we have no reason to lose hope, even in this uncharted territory that we have found ourselves. The strategy is to continue to work together as a group. It's in the interest of all producing countries and all consuming countries for the declaration of cooperation to continue to function efficiently and effectively as we have been able to accomplish in the last 5 years plus. This partnership is in the best interest of all of us. No one country or group of countries have the capacity to help to maintain balance in this market and guarantee security of supply. The members of the Declaration of Cooperation, OPEC and non-OPEC, have demonstrated their capacity to fulfill this mandate from day one. Having survived 2 mega cycles since the Declaration of Cooperation, I think this framework should be strengthened. The world should support this partnership and the framework as well as the platform so that we'll continue to play this noble role. We had gone further than that to also sign up on the Charter of Cooperation that went a step beyond the Declaration of Cooperation that brought these 23 producing and exporting countries together, to a charter that will bring together all producers in order to effectively address the long-term challenges that the energy transition poses to all of us. So I want to thank you for your patience, for welcoming us back to Houston, to CERAWeek. We're benefiting immensely from our multiple bilateral meetings with different stakeholders. We are listening, we are taking advice, and I think this is the beauty of multilateralism. On behalf of OPEC, I once again salute CERAWeek, S&P Global, and all delegates that have turned up for this historic CERAWeek.
Okay.
James?
Okay. So just in the interest of time, maybe, as Jeff said, maybe just raise your hand if you've got a question. And if you can keep it to maybe 1 question per person, that would be great, because we are constrained slightly by time. So anybody has a question, please raise your hand. Okay. Please.
Hi, Frank Kane from Arab News. In the current circumstances, you know, we are in an extremely implacable global position. I know you said that the declaration should be strengthened and extended, but the rest of the world has made Russia an international pariah. Isn't it time for OPEC to take a similar stance and effectively kick them out?
Thank you very much, Frank. I would have been surprised if this question was not asked. When we found ourselves in the depth of the previous cycle, 2015-2016, and we then thought it was the worst, it was the most unprecedented cycle in history, we came clean. We told the world that OPEC as a group was not in a position to restore stability into that market, and hence we reached out to producers outside the group. The Russian Federation plus 9 other countries saw reason to join us. And on the 10th of December 2016, we signed the historic Declaration of Cooperation, the first time ever in history where such a framework was signed between the two groups of countries. And I recall very well during those negotiations, some pundits did not give us a chance, that it was more like a wishful thinking. But eventually we signed, and when we signed, some pundits said it was not going to work. It's a matter of time that it will unravel. And we started implementing, and we continued to work together, to take decisions together, to implement those decisions together, to monitor the implementations together. And we saw when COVID struck how important this framework was, and the need to strengthen the partnership. We had hiccups, but we were able to overcome those hiccups. And we continued until this grave crisis erupted. And now, as I said, we are all almost bewildered with how we got to this, where we are, and how we're going to get out. But I told you, we remain confident that world leaders, with their wisdom, would be able to bring back the world on track of peace, tranquility, and stability. Diplomacy, multilateralism, at the end of the day will triumph over conflict and wars. It may take time, we hope not, but we should not lose hope. And the issue here that is facing the world is how to continue to meet not only the current demand that is continuing to grow, but future demand for energy. I think this Sarah Week is so historic and so timely, and I have listened to several experts that this world will continue to be thirsty for energy for the foreseeable future. Number two, all sources of energy will be required for the foreseeable future. Number three, this transition is not about transiting from hydrocarbons to renewables. The numbers, the statistics, the data are very clear. Number four, what the world should focus is on how to decarbonize hydrocarbons and other sources of energy. The challenge is about the emissions. We all signed up to the Paris Agreement. We are all implementing the Paris Agreement, known as encapsulated in the Glasgow Climate Pact, on the basis of the core principle of the UNFCCC, the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. The decision to be part of a group such as OPEC, or to be part of the partnership between OPEC and the non-OPEC producing countries under the Declaration of Cooperation, it's a sovereign decision of those respective members. I am not in a position to talk on their behalf, but all I can say, based on my little short experience, that the world will continue to need these producing countries to work together to ensure stability on a sustainable basis, and to continue to invest, to develop capacity, to meet this growing demand. This year, we are already bracing to return to pre-COVID consumption levels of beyond 100 million barrels of oil every single day. In 2020, at the depth of the slump, when in April we saw demand collapse by 22 million barrels a day, it was almost incomprehensible to project that by 2022 we are talking of going back to pre-COVID consumption levels. And looking at the medium to long term, there are literally no changes. In fact, the global economy will more than double by 2045, the way it is now. Population, there's a growth projection of about 20% to 9.5 billion people. All these are solid indicators that we cannot afford not to continue to invest and produce energy to fuel this demand. Now, oil has played its part and will continue to play its part. The growth, the development, the prosperity that we see around the world, it's all fueled mainly by oil. It's an oil civilization, and we cannot see in all our projections where this will diminish. To the contrary, according to our projections, by 2045, oil and gas will still account for over 50% of the global energy mix. So you see why it's important for the world to really take a pause and think very hard, look at the data, look at the science, listen to the scientists on how do we address greenhouse gas emissions in order to achieve our climate targets. The effort should not be on how we should switch off some sources and focus on the other. The crisis we are facing today on the energy front further buttresses this point that we need producers not only within OPEC but outside of OPEC to be fully aligned. Even if you are not part of the Declaration of Cooperation, we have got countries who call themselves countries of support. They were not able to sign with us this framework of cooperation due to a variety of national legal issues, but they fully support our efforts because it's a noble one to ensure security of supply, to maintain stability both for producers and consumers. I think we should do whatever we can to ensure, like we have done in the last 60 years plus, one, to depoliticize oil, and by extension, depoliticize energy. Number two, for our organization, OPEC, to insulate us from geopolitics. We are not a political organization. You can see our statute. We are bound by these principles of market stability, of security of supply, of working together with fellow members to ensure that we get value for this resource. So this is where we are, and we are determined to continue in that fashion. We look forward to congregating in Baghdad, in Iraq, later this month on the invitation of the Iraqi government on the 25th of March to take stock of the 60 plus years of the existence of this organization, and hopefully chart a course for the next 60 years. So we are hopeful that this organization will continue to play its role in the interest of producers, consumers, and the global economy.
Okay, Derek from the FT, please. Yeah.
Hi, Secretary General. Thank you for taking time to do this. The US government and others are talking about possible sanctions, tightening on Russian oil exports. In your view, would OPEC be willing or actually able to make up any shortfall in supply from Russia? And I ask if they would be able because there are some doubts now that the organization is able, or some of the producers are able to meet their production quotas. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very, very important question. And I would like to use this platform to say as follows. We are also following these developments continuously. Thanks to your excellent reports, we try to follow these developments. But OPEC, as an organization, as I said, for the 11th, 18th time, we are not a political organization. We try as much as possible to insulate ourselves from politics. We also continuously work to depoliticize oil. We have seen what such decisions are done in the past, and we hope that the world will insulate us, would insulate energy, insulate oil in particular and gas from the political vagaries of the time, because access to energy is a right, not a privilege. And this is not a resolution of OPEC. This is a resolution of the United Nations. It's the whole world that got together to pass the Sustainable Development Goals, in particular number 7. The poor folks in my own part of the world who account for the substantial number of nearly 600 million people in Africa who have no access to electricity as we speak, what we are taking for granted. The nearly 2.8 billion people that have no access to clean cooking gas, vast majority of them in Africa and Asia, they also have a right, according to the world, according to the United Nations, to access affordable, modern, clean energy. So what do we tell them? We have to overcome this crisis. We are in support. Our governments are working with other governments to play their own part in literally bringing back the world on the rails, because we are derailed, unfortunately, so that peace and stability will be restored to enable us to face other challenges, because this is not the only one we are facing. Our industry, the oil industry in particular, as I have said elsewhere, is under siege. Is under siege. Access to capital to invest in this industry is increasingly becoming a huge challenge. The climate conversation is increasingly being distorted, being misrepresented, crowding out this industry. And we know, and the science confirms, the data is there, that oil and gas has to be part of the solution in this transition. So we would like to use this important platform that you are providing us to convey our plea to world leaders to take all these factors into account when they take certain decisions because of the unintended consequences. Thank you.
Okay. Maybe a couple more questions and then we kind of...
Al Greenwood, ICIS, you gave a forecast for oil demand growth, 4.2 million barrels per day. Given the recent price hikes in oil that we've seen, any danger of a revision downwards to that estimate, given the threat to global growth?
Thank you very much. While I would not like to preempt my analysts, my colleagues in the Secretariat, some of them are here with us, Dr. Aid Al-Kathani and his very able team who are working around the clock to ensure that our projections, our assessments are in tune with reality. There is concern I have heard from several speakers here at Sarah Week that the current tightness in the market condition may lead to some demand destruction. But again, the jury is out because we don't know at the moment, because things are just evolving almost by the hour. And we really don't know where we're heading to. But be that as it may, the other side of the equation is probably more critical at the moment, that is supply. Supply is increasingly lagging behind, and capacity, as one of your able colleagues just made reference to, is also continuously, increasingly being constrained for a variety of reasons. And these are some of the topical issues that platforms like Sarah Week should be able to put on the front burner, that this industry needs to be protected. The below ground resources are in the region of about 1.5 trillion barrels of proven oil, proven reserves, 1.5 trillion. Two, I just made reference to the global energy mix. There's literally no much change between 2020 and 2045 in terms of the ratio, in terms of the representation. Oil and gas over 50%. We had one of our celebrated entrepreneurs tweeting a couple of days ago that, hey, look, although I'm a leading investor in electric vehicles, listen, guys, we have to continue to produce oil and gas. Now, this is reality. This is reality. Yes, it's a global crisis we are facing, but we have to remain focused. We have to remain calm, reasonable in our assessment. We have to listen to all voices, all views, in order to fit into decision making, whether at corporate level or at subnational or national levels, now even internationally. Thank you.
So just one quick question, if that's okay. The last question, yeah, thank you.
Hi, Kriti Gupta, Bloomberg News. There have been calls from around the world and from this conference for U.S. and Canadian shale players and oil players to ramp up their production. Are you concerned about losing market share?
I don't think anybody is talking about market share now. Now it's how do we survive this crisis? There is no capacity in the world at the moment that can replace 7 million barrels of exports, assuming that we are going to lose a volume of that region. Some are even, my colleagues are even talking of maybe 8 million when you put crude products, other liquids. The world simply does not have the capacity. So it's not about market share now. It's how do we mitigate? How do we overcome this crisis, yet maintaining the integrity of the industry as a reliable, dependable industry that the world can always look up to provide energy. Energy is a right, it's a must. And what is happening is also further testimony to the fact that we cannot afford to jeopardize this industry based on political or other extraneous considerations. This is how OPEC survived the last 60 plus years. We have had instances in OPEC where two of our countries, member countries, fought 8 years of war. Eight long years they fought war. And you know what? During those years, I sat at meetings in OPEC as a delegate, as a young delegate like you, and I saw those countries sitting next to each other because we sit alphabetically. They were sitting next to each other, taking decisions together. Why? Because of that principle that is enshrined in our statute. We are not a political organization. We may have difficulties, we may have conflicts, we may have differences of opinion from time to time. Of course, it's normal. But please, when you come to the Secretariat in Vienna, or now you meet virtually, you put that hat aside and face the issues at stake. You know what? Maybe you were not born then. One of our member countries invaded another. And I sat at those meetings, and those two countries sat at the same meeting. We lost about 4 million barrels a day because of that invasion. And we had a huge deficit and an energy crisis at hand. Those two countries, they sat down and we took decisions, and they went back to their battlefield until they were liberated. So we have demonstrated, as my lawyer friend said, beyond reasonable doubt, Leonardo, this is what you normally say, lawyers, beyond reasonable doubt that we are not a political organization. We feel we have empathy, sympathy for the humanitarian disaster that we are facing right now. In Vienna, we saw refugees pouring into Vienna from far Ukraine. And we are human, so nobody wants to see this. But the world needs to continue to protect us, to insulate us, and to depoliticize oil and energy in general, and to support us in continuing to work together with whoever who decides, any producer who decides to join us, because it's a noble cause. At the end of the day, we are all in the same boat, whether we are shale producers in the Permian, or producers in OPEC, or producers in Siberia. We are all in the same boat. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much.
We actually have a bilateral meeting. We're actually late for a bilateral.
Bon, sorry about that. Emergency here. Bon, ok. Fait que là, je vais vous montrer quelque chose. Ça a l'air qu'OPEC ne bougera pas. Je vais vous montrer quelque chose. Valeur, je voulais écouter ce que OPEC disait. Je crois que ça a l'air qu'OPEC ne bouge pas. Regardez le crude oil. Attendez une seconde, là. Comment ça que je peux faire, là? OK. Je sais pas combien le prix de gaz que vous êtes, mais à Montréal, là, où je reste, 1,98 le gaz. C'est du fun, ça? Allô Mel. Allô tout le monde. Fait que malheureusement, sinon il y a eu un traitement au laser à soir, à matin, puis il faut qu'il retourne à l'hôpital Sylvie vendredi. Fait qu'on prie pour qu'il guérisse le plus vite possible. Fait que, OK. Fait que, regardez, ça, c'est le prix du gaz, du crude oil live future chart. OK? Regardez ça 30 secondes. Là. Hier, quand on a fini notre live, il était à 1,26. Merci, Mel. Il était à 1,26 hier, quand on a fait notre live hier soir, ben cette nuit. Là, là il a baissé à 1,19. Puis vous voyez, là, il a baissé un petit peu. Il était. Je vais voir. Il a baissé 1,18. Vous voyez là, j'essaie d'avoir le chart. Et ça c'est cette nuit là, il était à 1,26. Sam. Arrête là, il est en train de regarder quelque chose. Un matin, il était. Là, si tu vois, ça a baissé jusqu'à 1,16, puis là, ça s'est stabilisé à 1,19. Merci, Sylvie. Puis Mélanie. C'est à ça. OK, là, il faut que je m'occupe de quelque chose ici, là. Je vais revenir bientôt, puis on va s'asseoir, puis on va regarder le... On va regarder les nouvelles. On va regarder les nouvelles. OK. Donnez-moi 5-10 minutes, là. Je reviens, puis on va regarder les nouvelles. OK, ensemble? Je vais partir un nouveau live sur le deuxième, OK? Fait que je reviens, OK? Bye. Merci d'être venu. I'll be back on the second one in about 5-10 minutes, OK? We're gonna sit down. We're gonna go over the news, OK? Thank you for joining. So, unfortunately, I don't know what OPEC said. Besides, they said they were not gonna do anything. Okay, I'll see you soon. Bye.